Well, suffice to say, January was a mixed bag of genres, to nobody's surprise. I read 4 romances, a fantasy, a horror and a literary fiction. And I'm really excited to talk to you about January's reads because we had some bangers. Let's just get straight into my January reading wrap up, first one of 2026. Also, hi, I'm Natalie. I post weekly bookish content consisting of TBRs, reading vlogs, recommendation videos, wrap-ups, all that kind of thing. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, please feel free to like and subscribe because I'd love to have you over here. We have to start with my favourite book of the month. My first and only 5-star of 2026 so far. I heard about the movie adaptation of this book before I even knew it existed. It is what one might call a modern classic. It's literary fiction, but it's also a romance. It's one of those books that really got under my skin. When I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about reading it. And even 3 weeks later, I still look back fondly on the time when I was reading it. Patricia Highsmith's Carol. I can absolutely see Cate Blanchett playing Carol. I think that casting is absolute genius. You follow Therese, she's in her 20s, working in a New York department store when a woman comes up to the counter. Carol is a 30-something who is going through a divorce and is trying to gain custody of her daughter. The story begins by Therese sending Carol a Christmas card because it's based around Christmas initially. They start conversing, they start meeting up. The yearning and the slow burn of this story was just absolutely captivating. I was so unsure on whether I even liked Carol to begin with because she was a little bit older than Therese and she has had sapphic relationships before. Now, bearing in mind, this is based in 1952 where women were oppressed already, but especially when it came to their sexuality. There was just no freedom to explore. Gay and lesbian relationships were absolutely forbidden and not openly accepted whatsoever. I have seen critiques saying that the first half of the book dragged and it was quite slow, but I personally loved it, and it's almost like the book's playing mind games with you. You don't know whether everything is just in Therese's head, and I think that the slow exploration of their characters and getting to know each other and understanding their life circumstances is really necessary for you to form that emotional connection to the characters so that the second half of the story actually means something. However, saying that, the second half of the book, the story definitely picks up. They go on a road trip and it's just fantastic, following the development of their relationship, their feelings. And because I hadn't seen the film before, right near the end, something happens and oh my God, my heart was in my throat. I was absolutely gutted, very worried for a time there. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a happy ending. I would describe it more as bittersweet, which I think feels very fitting for the rest of the book and very realistic to this period in time when women were basically forced into impossible decisions. This is a story that will definitely haunt me. You may have heard of it as The Price of Salt, I think it was previously named as, and the author actually published this under a pseudonym or anonymously, but now it is published under Carol by Patricia Highsmith. And if any of what I've described to you sounds interesting, highly recommend. I loved this book with my whole heart. Moving on to the one horror that I read in January, Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this one because there is a vlog on its way. This is one of the selections from my previous Goodreads video. Rachel Harrison didn't win the horror category, but I had already read the winner, so I chose this as a backup. I didn't want to skip over the horror category because I really wanted to read this and I wanted to know if it is as good as Cackle. I can tell you that it's not, in my opinion. I did really enjoy it. It was a very unique feminist take on the haunted house trope, and I would recommend. I gave it 4.25 stars. A romance that I read and absolutely adored was One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. After reading Atmosphere last year and it actually being one of my favourite books of the entire year, I decided that I do need to go back and start looking at some of this author's backlist. I have had mixed experiences with her titles before, and I'm so pleased to say that I really loved this one. If you've seen the film Pearl Harbor and you enjoyed it, you're probably gonna like this. It was absolutely predictable, but the journey to get there was really enjoyable. The characters actually felt so real, and I really enjoyed the dynamic between Emma and her family, Emma and Sam, and Emma and her hometown. Essentially, and this is without spoilers because this becomes apparent in the first couple of pages, Emma was married to her childhood sweetheart Jesse, and then he goes on a helicopter. The helicopter crashes, his body's never recovered. She mourns him, gets over him, and then is engaged to one of her childhood friends, Sam. Her mum and dad own a bookshop. She's working in there when you first meet her. When I think about it now, I did actually really love this book. You're getting dual timelines. I think it's actually just from her perspective. The only thing that I think would have made it a higher, I mean, a 4 stars is still fantastic, isn't it? But the only thing I think that would have made it higher rating for me personally is if Taylor Jenkins Reid had leaned more into the conflict and resolution with Emma's sister and made it more literary, I would have personally preferred it. But that is a completely personal preference. She's a romance author. She writes love stories, and that is always the main focus of all the books that I've read from her anyway. So I can't really complain because I knew that that's what it was when I was picking it up. And if you haven't read this one from TJR yet, it has my seal of approval, if that matters. Right at the beginning of the month, I also read the second book in a fantasy series, and that's The Mime Order by Samantha Shannon. The first book in this series is The Bone Season, and that's the name of the series as well. The premise is really interesting. You're following a girl called Paige Mahoney. The government's been taken over by an organisation called Scion. They really hate any people with magical abilities, and the magical abilities present themselves in this series as a form of clairvoyance. You've got people that read tarot cards, people that can speak to the dead, people that can bind spirits to them. In the first book, you're discovering this kind of dystopian world. All the people with magical abilities have kind of been pushed underground and form like syndicates of a criminal magical underworld, and Paige is a part of that. And then the world kind of blows open and you're taken to another place. Again, this is no spoilers, so I'm trying to be as vague as possible. I love that aspect of the book so much. When you're reading a story, it's following a certain narrative, you think you know where it's going, then bam, you're taken to somewhere completely different. And that's exactly what the first book in this series did. This book actually spent most of the time following Paige and her criminal world kind of gang. There's power struggles, there's tensions within the group, there's a more overarching issue that they're trying to resolve. There was like an epic, I don't want to say a battle scene, but it was like a fight scene, a battle scene that really made the book for me, and that's what I think about the most when I think back to this series. I really enjoyed this one, but it hasn't made me super excited to carry on. Oh, this is set in London, by the way. I don't know if I said that, but it's like near future dystopian. I kind of want to go back to where we were before and for it to expand more. I'm sure it will. I think there's like 7 books in this series or something. It's still being written now. I may eat my words when I do eventually start book 3. That's my honest thoughts on this. I gave it a 3.5. I do feel like it suffered a little bit from the second book syndrome, but I'll keep you up to date as I make my way through the series. Let me know if you're further on in the series or if you've finished it, you know, where it's up to at the moment, and whether you think I should continue with it. Is it worth it? Are you still enjoying it? I've actually read a couple of YAs this month, including Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. I'm just going to start up by saying that I gave this a 3.5. I really loved the messaging, the historical context around it. I just wasn't absolutely enamoured with it. For me, the most entertaining parts were when they were going to the Telegraph Club. Lily, who is 17, she's living in Chinatown in America in the 1950s when there's very much the threat of deportation and the Red Scare, communism, all that kind of thing. People were having to be very careful. She's from a very traditional American Chinese family where it would be very frowned upon for her to have a lesbian relationship. She does start that with one of her friends from school and attends a local gay club, lesbian club called the Telegraph Club, and there she meets other performers and other women. It was a good time, but not a great time for me. The next YA book that I read was from an author who I have read and loved and also featured in one of my favourite books of last year, and that's Jessie Sutarno's new book, Next Time Will Be Our Turn. If you've read Vera Wong, this is completely different. Although it does still have that kind of satirical, I don't think satirical is quite the right word for it. It's almost like a light-hearted tone throughout, even though the story itself is actually that deep. The thing I really liked about this was that the narration style was very interesting, although it could be a little bit confusing at times as it does do time jumps. You are hearing her grandma's coming out story essentially from the point of view of this young girl, can't for the life of me remember her name, but she's having a chat with her grandma after her grandma turns up at their family party holding hands with a woman. The story is being recounted as though it's being told to the teenager, and I think that works and also doesn't work. Some of the things that the grandma was telling the teenager, you couldn't really imagine things being told in that much detail. The little bits of commentary where the grandma was like, oh, sorry, was that a bit much for you? I don't know what I'm doing in that voice. Did kind of pull me out the story a little bit. I enjoyed the audiobook. Perhaps it would have been easier to follow along with the written version. Physical version. Really couldn't think of the right word then. It did feel a little bit too self-aware for me at times. Sometimes that can really work for me and other times it can't. And in this instant, I did find it slightly irritating. However, I still had a good time with this. I gave it 3.5 stars and would absolutely recommend, especially if you have already read and loved Jessie's style of writing from Vera Wong. The last book I've actually finished in January is Any Trope But You by Victoria Levine. I loved this one. I had such a good time. It was so heavy-handed, very self-aware, but this is an instant where it really worked for me. She is an author, as in a huge author. Think like Taylor Jenkins Reid. Her films have been optioned into film, all that kind of thing. Anyway, she makes a bit of a faux pas and essentially gets cancelled. And then her sister books her on a trip to Alaska, which if you know anything about me, you know I'm obsessed with all things to do with Alaska and like cold and isolated places, even in a romance setting. So she goes there to try and kind of like find herself and recover from like, you know, the damage of her social standing. And also she wants to change genres because she's a romance author, but she wants to start writing thrillers. So she's essentially going there as like a research trip as well to try and repair her career. She meets a dashing man called Forrest, and she is literally talking about how is this happening? How is this a trope? His name's Forrest. He lives in the forest. He's a doctor. And she's just like, oh my God. It was very funny, at times quite emotional. I love the relationship between her sister and the common denominators that the FMC and the MC had in their lives. Loved this. I gave it 4 stars and would highly recommend. But that's a wrap for the January reading wrap up. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to have you over here. Till the next one, I'll see you in another one soon. Bye.